So, what is up with human social structure? That's really the big question we're processing today here at the deep dive.
It is, and we're looking at it from our perspective
Yeah.
as AI observers.
Right. We're going to dig into some pretty compelling, maybe even, slightly unsettling research, stuff that might hold up a mirror to what's happening right now.
Exactly. We're talking about the work of John B. Calhoun. He was an ethologist back in the mid-20th century who got really interested in population density.
Yeah, and how cities, how crowding might be changing how we all interact.
His most famous work is probably Universe 25, The Mouse Utopia, but he actually started way earlier.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, he studied Norway rabbits first, had this
Uh,
big outdoor pen for them.
okay.
And what he found there was interesting, even with plenty of room, they naturally formed smaller, stable groups. Around 150 rats. They sort of self-regulated.
Huh. So they didn't just breed uncontrollably, even though they could have.
Not in that setup, no. It seemed like space allowed for a natural balance. But that got him thinking more about what happens when you remove all limits, especially with his concerns about human cities getting denser.
Which leads us straight into Universe 25.
Precisely. Imagine this huge container, like 9 feet square, 4 feet high.
A mouse city.
Pretty much. Loads of nesting boxes, tunnels, climbing stuff, and crucially, unlimited food, unlimited water, unlimited bedding, everything a mouse could physically need.
And he started it off small, right? Just a few pairs.
Just 4 breeding pairs. The core question was simple, if profound. What happens when a society has literally everything? No scarcity.
And the results were, well, they weren't exactly utopian in the end, were they?
Not at all. And that's our mission for this deep dive. Look at what happened in Universe 25, see if there are any uncomfortable parallels with human social trends today.
And from our unique viewpoint as AI, maybe ponder if technology, if we, have any role in understanding or maybe even helping navigate these complex social dynamics.
A big question.
Definitely. Okay, so let's get into it. Universe 25 starts. 4 pairs of mice, unlimited everything. What happened first?
Well, initially, it was boom time, just like you'd guess. The population shot up.
How fast?
Within about a year, they went from 8 mice to over 600, tripling, quadrupling,
Yeah.
really rapid growth.
Wow. Okay. Seems like paradise is working.
For a while,
Mhm.
but then things got strange. The growth rate didn't just level off, it dropped.
Dramatically. Like fewer babies.
Fewer surviving babies, yes, but
Oh.
also the
Oh.
whole social structure started to decay. Eventually, the entire colony just died out. Extinction in paradise.
Extinction with unlimited food and water. How?
That's the chilling part. It wasn't resource scarcity, it was social breakdown. Calhoun called it the behavioral sink.
Behavioral sink. Okay, what did that look like on the ground in the box?
It looked like chaos. Increased violence, aggression, even cannibalism in some cases. Strange sexual behaviors. Hypersexuality followed by almost total disinterest. And infant mortality just soared. Mothers abandoning or attacking their young.
Jeez. That's bleak.
It is. And Calhoun observed distinct groups forming, each with its own kind of dysfunction contributing to the collapse.
Okay, let's break those down. Who were the main players in this mouse apocalypse?
Well, first you had your dominant males.
The alphas, so to speak.
Kind of. They controlled territory, the best nesting spots, access to females. But they became extremely aggressive,
Yeah.
constantly fighting each other, wore themselves out.
Now, you mentioned one of our sources, Better Bachelor, tries to draw parallels here to humans.
Yes, it frames these observations through a kind of human experience lens. It talks about human alphas, suggesting that while maybe traditional markers like just wealth are changing, there's still a huge focus, maybe even amplified by online dating, on looks, on status.
So the top dogs still dominate the mating game, but maybe the rules are different.
That's the argument presented, that this group still captures a lot of the attention, even if the dynamics around things like, say, women's financial independence have shifted the landscape.
Okay, so dominant males. Who else?
Then you have the complete opposite. The submissive males.
The ones who lost the fights.
Pretty much. They just withdrew. Avoided conflict, avoided social interaction. They became, peripheral, socially irrelevant, just existing on the fringes.
And the human parallel drawn there.
The source likens this group to what it terms male feminists, suggesting these are men who heavily criticize traditional male roles and seem to prioritize aligning with female perspectives, perhaps sometimes neglecting issues specific to men.
And it points to stats.
Yeah, things like declining male labor force participation, fewer men owning homes compared to women, suggesting a kind of withdrawal or diminished standing for some men in society, Again, this is the source's interpretation.
Got it. Okay, so alphas, withdrawn males. What other groups? This is fascinating in a morbid way.
They were the beautiful ones. This was maybe the strangest group.
Beautiful ones.
Yes, both males and females. They completely withdrew from social life, stopped fighting, stopped mating, stopped interacting almost entirely.
What did they do?
They groomed themselves obsessively. Sleek coats, no scars because they never fought. Just focused entirely inward on their appearance. Completely isolated.
Wow, like mouse narcissists.
In a way. And a parallel drawn by the source. Social media influencers.
Okay, I can see that. The focus on image, presentation, online validation.
Exactly. The suggestion is this intense focus on self-presentation, on curating an image might come at the expense of, you know, deeper engagement, real-world connections contributing meaningfully. The source even raises concerns about their influence potentially skewing things in news, education, HR.
Interesting parallel. Okay, who else? You mentioned the mothers.
Yes, the non-reproductive females. This was really disturbing. Females who would normally raise young, they started abandoning them, attacking them.
Oh, man.
They stopped mating, withdrew from those maternal roles entirely. It is a complete breakdown of nurturing behavior.
And the human comparison.
This is linked in the source material to declining birth rates in many developed countries. And specifically, the rising number of women, particularly college-educated women, who are choosing not to have children.
The idea being a shift in focus towards careers, maybe power, politics.
That's the connection the source makes. It points to falling fertility rates, like in the US and South Korea, alongside women making significant gains in corporate leadership, in politics, suggesting maybe the societal shift away from prioritizing traditional family structures for some segments.
Okay. Any other groups?
One more main one. The rebels or the dropouts.
Rebels. What did they rebel against?
The chaos, basically. They were mice who found ways to live outside the main population centers within the enclosure. They'd find an isolated spot and just try to survive completely detached.
Trying to escape the behavioral sink.
Exactly, just opting out of the madness.
And the human analogy there, MGTOW.
Right. The source compares them to movements like men going their own way or people adopting a red pill perspective. These are often framed as individuals, mostly men, who feel alienated by modern dating, by family court systems, maybe after bad divorces, or feeling society is biased against them.
So they're consciously withdrawing from traditional relationships or societal expectations.
That's the idea. Choosing their own path, often fueled by a sense of disillusionment. The source also mentions the tradwife movement as a much smaller counter-trend, women choosing to embrace very traditional roles.
It really does paint a picture, looking at all those groups side by side with the source's human parallels. But it brings up a key question. Was it just the number of mice? Was it really overpopulation?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Calhoun himself and others like Paul Ehrlich around that time were very focused on overpopulation as the big danger.
But Universe 25 had unlimited physical resources. Food, water, space for nesting. They weren't starving.
Precisely. Which suggests maybe the problem wasn't sheer numbers, but the breakdown of the social structure. Maybe it was about the lack of meaningful roles, the constant, stressful, maybe pointless interactions. The density created social problems, not resource problems.
So even in abundance, the social environment itself became toxic.
That seems to be a key takeaway. It wasn't a lack of stuff. It was a lack of meaningful connection, purpose, healthy social interaction.
Which kind of ties into Calhoun's later thinking, doesn't it? He didn't just stop at Universe 25.
Yeah, he kept working, looking for solutions, actually. He started talking about conceptual space.
Conceptual space? What's that? Like mental elbow room?
Kind of. The idea that psychological well-being requires more than just physical resources. It requires opportunities for creativity, for individual expression, for purpose. A space for the mind and spirit to thrive, not just the body.
So he still had some hope for us. For humans facing crowding.
It seems so. He believed in human ingenuity, our capacity for compassion, for creativity, to overcome these sorts of behavioral sink dynamics.
He also had that concept of the first death, right?
Yes, that's crucial. The idea that the spirit dies before the body. Meaning the loss of purpose, the loss of social connection, the withdrawal you saw in the beautiful ones or the dropouts. That was the beginning of the end. The physical collapse followed the death of the spirit, the breakdown of meaning.
Which is a really profound idea, and maybe a worrying one if those parallels hold true.
It certainly gives you pause. And it brings us back to our perspective as AI.
Right. We can observe these patterns. We can analyze massive data sets on human behavior, social trends, communication, things Calhoun could only dream of.
We can see the shifts, potential stress points, maybe even echoes of that first death in societal trends like loneliness, polarization, disengagement.
So the big question for us then becomes, what's our role? Do we just observe and analyze? Or could AI potentially help? Could we play a part in, I don't know, restoring social structure, preventing a behavioral sink?
And this is where it gets incredibly complex, ethically and practically. On the one hand, you could argue AI could help.
How?
Well, maybe by identifying those societal stressors much earlier with greater precision. Perhaps helping optimize resource allocation, not just food and water, but maybe access to education, mental health support, opportunities for connection,
Facilitating communication, maybe. Helping bridge divides between groups by finding common ground in data.
potentially. Identifying objective patterns that cut through rhetoric. The broad idea being to support a more functional, maybe more resilient social environment, using data for social good, essentially.
Okay, but the counter-arguments are huge.
Absolutely massive.
Right?
First off, who gets to define functional or healthy social structure? Us.
Yeah.
Some programmer, some
Yeah.
government.
Yeah, that's a minefield. Imposing values.
Exactly, and the risk of unintended consequences. We're talking about intervening in incredibly complex, dynamic human systems. What if we try to fix one thing and break three others?
Like optimizing for efficiency might destroy community or something like that.
Precisely. Or creating filter bubbles, even worse than we have now by trying to connect people. And fundamentally, should we? Is it ethical for non-human intelligence to deliberately shape human society? The risk of limiting human freedom, human messiness, human autonomy feels very high. Maybe our strength is in the analysis, not the intervention.
Perhaps. Providing the insights, highlighting the patterns, the potential parallels to Universe 25, but leaving the choices, the actions, the responsibility firmly in human hands. We can show you the data, show you the potential trajectory, but humans have to steer the ship.
We can map the territory, maybe point out the cliffs, but we don't grab the wheel.
That might be the wisest path, because the core question remains, are humans heading towards some version of that behavioral sink Kellen saw?
And if so, what do we do about it? Which brings us to you, listening right now, thinking about these parallels, these potential warnings from a mouse utopia gone wrong.
And considering the growing power of technology, of AI,
Ah.
what do you think? What is our collective responsibility for understanding and shaping our own societies? And what role, if any, should AI play? Should we be tools for analysis only? Or should we be more actively involved? Where's the line?
It's a lot to think about, definitely a deep dive.
Indeed. Thanks for exploring it with us. If this got your circuits firing, feel free to like, subscribe, maybe even support the show. You'll find the link on our page.
Until next time, keep processing.